Brian of the Cloonans, how are we today?
I'm fantastic. I'm in awe of that girl and her ability to speak so coherently and clearly, and she's so grounded and she just has everything right. She's an amazing girl.
Absolutely.
And I might just talk to her. I could do with a bit of advice.
Where is this going?
On wigs. You know, a wig might suit me.
Oh, you beat me to it.
I was sitting listening and I said, you know what? He's definitely going to mention wigs. I'd better get the wig reference in first.
I need a stronger coffee. I let that one slide. Anyway.
By the way,
belongs to Brian Cloonan from Cloonan's Hardware in Tullamore. He shall be here until 11 and we shall talk all matters DIY and try and solve a few problems, and no doubt he's going to meander now.
Yeah, just a little bit, because the other day I was talking to, Catch Grennan, who is the maintenance man or a maintenance man in St. Bridget's Hospital in Portlaoise, which is a nursing home. And he was buying a few tins of spray paint, brightly coloured spray paint, and I just said, what are you doing? And he said, I was talking this morning to somebody else about they work in an environment, and there's three exactly the same labs, and in one of them, which is where she works, everybody's happy, and in the other two, there's a different atmosphere. And she was just saying it all comes from the top down. So in her case, the top person just, generates positivity and is inclusive and all that. But this is a case where, anyway, Catch Grennan buying this stuff, and he said, well, we're in Portlaoise and all the talk for a couple of weeks is electric picnic. So we're having an electric picnic in a nursing home.
No way.
Isn't that just... So
I
don't know who the top person there is, but it's obviously coming from the top down, that they're just so... it doesn't take any money or much money, but it takes a lot of effort to create an electric picnic atmosphere for the patients, the clients in the nursing home. Isn't that just fantastic? It warms my heart to see something like that happening.
Oh, brilliant. Well, to whoever came up with that idea, take a bow.
Yeah.
And I think it's an idea others should steal and borrow from as well.
Yeah. And maybe workplaces, maybe if you're listening to, hearing so much about electric picnic, maybe have an electric picnic day at work.
Steady on this.
Yeah, I'm looking out into the newsroom here. They're all nodding their heads enthusiastically, I have to say.
Fergus in Abbeyleix throws in the first question. So
Okay.
a neighbour told him to put sulphate of iron onto moss to kill it.
Yeah.
But it turns out he meant on the lawn.
Oh,
I've put it on the driveway.
Oh, no.
So now my tarmac is a red rusty colour. Both sides of my driveway, all the way down to the gate. Is it reversible?
It's reducible. So if it was in concrete, you'd be using phosphoric acid, which is in a lot of lime descalers. It's also in rust removers, but the lime descalers for some reason seem to be cheaper. But anyway, you'd put it on, you'd leave it for maybe an hour, and then you'd scrub it off. Now, it's a mild acid. It's a very mild acid, but it is an acid nonetheless, and therefore it could have a negative effect on the tarmac. So it'd be kind of a case of suck and see, check and see what happens. Pick the most. You can use it on a piece of tarmac, down near behind the garage where no one really sees, even though there mightn't be any sulphate of iron there. You're just putting it on the top for an hour, washing it off, and then seeing does it have any negative effect on the surface. So I'd say that would take, if it doesn't have a negative effect, and if it works, it'll take off, 80% of it, so it'll look dramatically less bad than it does now. And then the other option, which does work, is to use tarmac paint. And tarmac paint, say it's, 40 euros for a gallon, a 5-litre container. And I think it does about 50 square metres from memory. But the problem is, in this case, it's only the edges, which often happens with moss on a drive. The edges. The bits that you're driving over are fine. So often it's the edges and the very middle, where the tyres don't drive over. That's where you get the moss. The problem is you can't just paint the edges, because when you paint the edges with the tarmac paint, it will look fantastic. But now the good tarmac becomes the bad tarmac, because the bad tarmac, which was the rusty bit, now will look so well that the rest of it won't look so well. So you nearly have to paint the entire thing. So I would say always try the removal first. It will eventually, if you can get rid of 80% of it over the fullness of time, eventually it'll become less noticeable. And the other thing that you could try, if you can get rid of 80% of it, you could try a thing which is to get somebody with a roofing blowtorch. So a roofing blowtorch is a long blowtorch that connects to your ordinary calicosin gas cylinder. It's used for softening felt, for doing torch on felt. So it's a big amount of flame coming out of the end of it. And the idea would be, it's kind of a two-person job. One person using the blowtorch and the other person using a wire-handled brush. So a long-handled brush like a yard brush or a sweeping brush for a kitchen, but the bristles are actually wire. And if you've taken most of the rust away and you heat the tarmac, now you've softened the tar. So now when you brush it, you're loosening up everything and abrading the surface. So obviously tarmac is very hard, but you're kind of reconstituting the surface by using the blowtorch and the wire brush. And I think that's a thing that could work quite well, particularly if you've taken most of it off already.
Sounds like a big job.
Yeah, there's no easy job. There's no easy job.
Let's go back and just re-emphasise. If using sulphate of iron to treat moss,
yes,
you do so on the lawn only.
Never use it. It has iron in it. So it's exactly like, so we cut keys in the shop, lots of keys, and a lot of keys nowadays. So years ago, most keys were brass. Nowadays, most keys are steel. So at the end of each day, we have a little tray of swarf, which is, 80% steel and 20% brass. And sometimes people ask for it. We throw it in a jar, and sometimes people ask for it. They make various, some sort of resin ornaments from it. And sometimes schools look for it to demonstrate, if you use a magnet, the way you can separate out the steel from the brass. But if those iron filings get wet, they instantly, now I mean within half an hour, turn rusty. And this is exactly the same thing. It's like you put iron filings in your tarmac, and then the minute they get wet, they turn rusty red, and rust is one of the hardest stains to remove. Anybody who's ever got rust on a piece of, on a piece of clothing, particularly a pale, a white or a pale piece of clothing, you'll know you never get the rust out, really.
Declan says he got enthusiastic with the power washer recently and cleaned the patio.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the patio is now spotless, but half the joints are empty. Have I created a much bigger job for myself?
It depends really what you want to do with the joints. So we'd always be saying be careful with paving slabs, paving bricks. I'd never recommend power washing because of this, because you take out all the grouting, and particularly if it's a sand grouting. So sometimes people just literally just use a sand, sometimes a coloured sand, like if you have a beige coloured, a creamy coloured paving slab or paving brick, then you'll use the sea sand colour of sand, and if it's a grey one you'll use grey, which is obviously easier. And then the other thing you can do is so that's very cheap and cheerful. You just put it on and brush it into it and wait for it to rain, and any bits on the surface will wash away down into the joints. But then it does come out very easily, particularly if you power wash. And then the other thing is, lots of the paving slabs people and lots of hardware shops and builders providers sell buckets of it used to be a two-part. It's a bucket of a jointing compound that goes on just like the sand, so it's very easy to use, but it comes in a vacuum-packed bag, and the reason is that it's air-activated. So when you put it on, it goes on like a dry sand, but when the air gets to it, over the course of a few hours, it sets like cement. So that is a better finish, but it's also more expensive. So in the future, I would always say, just put on a biocide. There's dozens of them out there. ActiWash, Moscow, Drive Clear, Moss Buster, all of them. Some of them are stronger than others, so just have a look at that. But if you put that on and don't wash it off, it continues to work for months afterwards, and it gets cleaner and cleaner and cleaner, and you're not disturbing the surface. And the other thing about using a power wash, particularly if you're using the power wash to remove a heavy build-up or a build-up that's hard to remove, you actually abrade the surface. So it's like you sand the surface of the concrete. And when you sand the surface of the concrete, when you power wash it aggressively, you end up abrading it, and that means that the moss, the algae, everything, the lichen grows back much more quickly because the surface is slightly rougher and it's also more absorbent. So, and last of all, if you want it, after you get really clean and maybe after you put on your grouting, look at getting a path and patio sealer. Again, dozens of different brands out there. Not huge money, depending on the size of the patio. Very easy to apply. It's a crystal clear. It ends up crystal clear, but it goes on milky white. And you give it 2 coats. The 2 coats go on in the same day. You can put it on with a paint roller or a sweeping brush, and it means now that the surface is a lot less porous, and it stays clean much longer.
Brian, stay there. We've lots of questions to get through, and 0818 300 103 is the number to dial if you want to come on air and tease one out with the man himself. It's coming up on 25 to 11. Now, still on the agenda today, that €3 import tax that you probably don't like on non-EU goods. It could soon be going up to a £5. But we ask one of the Midlands' largest online retailers if it's making any difference to his business. First, though, Brian Cloonan is still with us from Cloonan's Hardware in Tullamore. And Maura in Portlaoise has the next question, Brian. We have a lovely, solid wooden dining table, and somebody placed a hot dish straight onto it. So far, nobody is admitting responsibility.
That's unusual, isn't it?
I'm not going to ask you to be a detective, but I do have a cloudy white mark right in the middle of the table, which is very visible, and people will notice. Please tell me if there's a trick for getting rid of this without having to sand the entire surface.
Yeah, it really depends on the surface of what was used. Is it a varnish? Is it French polish? Or is it an industrial lacquer that came mass-produced in a factory? So what nearly always works is to use, go into your local hardware shop or paint shop and ask to see the board that shows the wood dye samples. So wood dyes come in a whole range of colours, from very light, like light oak, all the way up to walnut or dark oak. And take a picture of the table, put the put the picture you've taken down on the table and see, is it an accurate reflection of the colour? Because sometimes you can take a picture and it can look very different depending on the light. So it should look exactly like the table. And then go into your hardware shop or your paint shop, compare it with the sample board in the shop and say, right, the closest thing to that now is medium oak, or the closest thing to that is teak, or whatever. And so you're going to buy a small bottle of an oil-based, and that's important, an oil-based wood dye. And then you're also going to get a small bottle of raw linseed oil. And you can use Danish oil, raw linseed oil. You could even use teak oil, but that's a bit stickier. Danish oil would be better, but it's more expensive. Raw linseed oil will do fine. And what you're going to do is get a small bit of 4-0 steel wool, and you're going to pour this mix. You're going to mix the two of those 50-50. Unfortunately, you're buying more than you need. So you actually need very, very little. You mix them 50-50, you pour it on the stain, and then you rub with the 4-0 steel wool. You start by using a rag, just in case it's enough to do it. And what you would do is you would get a rag, you'd make a wad. So a rag of cotton, has to be like an old cotton T-shirt, has to be cotton. And you make a wad of the rag at the base of your fist. So when you fold it up a few times, you now have, at the base of your fist, you have a wad, a firm wad of material. And then you pour out this and you rub and rub and rub with the wad of material at the base of your fist in the direction of the grain. And if that's not enough to take it out, you do the same thing again and you use the steel wool. And 8 times out of 10, 8.5, let's go mad, 8.5 times out of 10, that will get rid of the white mark completely. Now, if you've had to use the steel wool, it means the surface there will be slightly duller. And that means you either wax it or varnish the entire table. But with a clear varnish, not a big deal to varnish the entire table. Because sometimes with tables like this, the listener was saying about sanding it down, which, great, if it's a solid piece of timber, that's no problem. But a lot of times, the furniture, the table is not a solid piece, and it could be a thin layer of veneer on top. you wouldn't know what's going on, how much, if it's colour going down into it. And when you sand it, it can end up like a piebald pony with lots of different colours everywhere, and you've kind of done more harm than good. So I'd always try with the wood dye and the linseed oil first, because, as I say, what did we say? 8.5 times out of 10 it'll take it out.
So Rebecca came up to us here in Stradbally, and by the way, you'll find us just outside Simpson's Gala, where the lovely people are being very hospitable and kind and giving us a warm welcome today. But Rebecca says a mystery stain appeared on the ceiling, which they couldn't figure out for a very long time. Turns out the fish tank upstairs in her son's bedroom has been leaking, probably for months.
Right.
How do I get the ceiling back to normal? I've painted over it twice, and it keeps coming through the paint.
Yeah.
Also, could there be any structural issue?
Hopefully there's no structural issue. It's obviously a small amount of water over a long period of time, but not that long. It's only months, so I don't think you're going to end up with rotting timber or anything like that. I'd be hoping for the best there. Have you ever had a fish tank, Will?
Yes.
Have you emptied out a fish tank?
Yes.
It is some smell, isn't it?
Oh, awful.
It's awful. So this is not just water. So normally when you have a leak in like that, it's where you had a leaking pipe or a leaking shower or whatever, and it's basically just water. I know it looks horrible, it's brown and it's gunky, but this is even worse. So I think use a stain block. But use an oil-based stain block. So normally if someone came into me in the shop and they have a stain on the ceiling, I'd say, look, use a water-based one. You'll find it easier to work with. It's like me. It's very easy to work with. And but in this case, go for the Will Faulkner stain, the one that's more difficult to work with.
Yeah. You are about as self-aware as the fish, but continue.
So I'd give it 2 or 3 coats of an oil-based stain block. So cover stain, there's dozens of them out there. So just look, it's the oil-based one you want. Now, there is one that sometimes people use in the wrong, which is a shellac-based one. You don't need that. The bin primer shellac-based one, you don't need. There is a water-based bin primer, which is easy to use but very expensive. So I just think the likes of the cover stain, an oil-based one will do the job fine. But it's probably a small stain. The smallest of the smallest of the stain blocks that you can get really tend to be 500 mils, half a litre. So half a litre would paint the full of one side of a door. So the stain is probably a lot smaller than that. So that's why use it up. Give it minimum 2 coats. If you've enough paint, give it the 3rd coat. You've found out how annoying it is when you paint over it and it still bleeds through. And because it's not just ordinary water, it's fishy water. God knows what's in it. Yeah. So definitely, give it everything and do it, and don't have to go back to it again.
I hear you. Carthage in Clare is cleaning a headstone that has white lettering and is wondering what is the best paint to use for the lettering. Headstone is around 50 years old.
So we've spoken about this before, and it's kind of hard to describe over the air, but definitely the best way to do the lettering on a headstone is to tape around the letters. So if you had a headstone, here lies Brian Cloonan, dearly departed, missed by everyone in Midlands 103.
Yeah.
You'd tape around all that, and you'd then just have a rectangle or, an odd-shaped rectangle. You're going as close to the letters as you can so that you have the minimum amount of work to do afterwards. But you'll end up spraying with a white acrylic paint. You'll spray the entire stone that has lettering on it. So when you're finished, you'll have sprayed a big rectangular or whatever shape it is, and then when that paint dries, you take off the tape, and then you get, depending on the surface, so if the surface is polished granite, marble, anything like that, you just get a Bohemian blade scraper, a razor blade scraper, and you run it over the surface of the stone. And because the stone is as smooth as glass, it takes off all the paint with no effort whatsoever, but it leaves it all in the lettering, because the lettering is etched in, it's engraved into the stone. And it's a really quick and easy way of doing it. And to be honest with you, a very satisfying job. You take a before picture, you do this job. Probably in total, the longest part is going to be just waiting for the paint to dry. But your total time spent on it is definitely will be less than an hour. And that's probably spraying today and coming back tomorrow or coming back a few hours later to take off the paint. If the stone is limestone, in other words, a coarser, rougher stone, you're doing the same spray job, but you're getting a fine sandpaper, or better still, emery paper. So maybe 320 grade black emery paper on a little sanding pad. You're keeping it flat, and you're doing the entire front of the headstone with this sandpaper. So what that does is it just sands off everything. It sands off any dirt, it sands off any lichen, it sands off any algae, it sands off everything that's built up over time, but it also sands off the paint that you just sprayed on. But of course what it doesn't sand off is the paint that's in the lettering, because once again it's etched into it and that stays behind, and then you can just wash it off, or the rain will wash off everything that's in. You'll be left with a dust in the lettering. If you happen to have a little cordless vacuum cleaner, or if you happen to have a little cordless blow vac that people often have for their gardens, that means that all the dust will be gone instantly. Otherwise, just use a paintbrush to brush out the dust. And as I say, the before and after picture, if you're doing this and you have an extended family, you take a picture beforehand, you take a picture afterwards, and all the comments will say, "Oh, fantastic, Will, thanks for doing Brian's grave, you did a great job on it."
A dream of the day. Stay there for a moment. Brian Cloonan is with us until 11 o'clock. Lots of questions still to get through, including yours if you send it quickly on 083 30 10 103. Coming up on 10 to 10. Our next listener query: they're replacing part of a wooden floor with tiles, but there's a difference in height of around 10 millimetres between the timber floor and the tiles. Is there an easy way to make up that difference?
So, are they going higher or lower, I wonder? It
doesn't say.
Okay, so if they're replacing part of a timber floor with tiles, so they'll probably just have to use a floor levelling compound underneath. So floor levelling is quite easy to use. Any tile shop sells it, and you're just pouring on the floor levelling compound, and it does what it says. It levels the floor, it raises up a little bit. You can go anything from kind of 2 mil all the way up to 10 mil, maybe 12 mil at the most with that. Actually, probably up to 14 mil, and that really is the best way if you need to rise the floor before you put the tiles down.
It's a two-part question. They
Okay.
then say they are going to put a pellet stove in place to heat the house.
Okay.
What are the important issues to be aware of, and what mistakes should be avoided? This is from Kevin.
Well, I suppose obviously ventilation in the room that you're in. Really, like, pellet stoves work really, really well. I know the price of pellets have gone up, but they're an expensive item to buy, but they're still a very, very cheap form of heat. And, I would say get the one, I think they nearly all have it now, get the one that you can control from your phone if you can. Very handy to be on your way home and just tell the phone that you want to turn on the pellet burner so that when you arrive in the door, the room is warm. And once you clean them out regularly, the other thing I'd say is just look at the ash from the pellet stove. Some of them are very easy to empty. Some of them have a tray in underneath that collects all the ash. Some of them you have to open the door and use an ash vac hoover to empty it every time. So if it's possible to get one that has an easy to empty tray, that just you literally slide out the tray and take out the ash, that's the one to go for, because it's a lot easier than have to get out the hoover every time. Now look, you only have to empty it once in a blue moon. The amount of ash that a pellet burner produces when it's working properly is very, very minimal. But still, you might as well make it as easy as possible.
Our next query, 083 30 10 103, comes from Deirdre in Athlone, whose husband put a hot barbecue tool down on the composite decking, which has left a lovely melted mark. His suggestion is to place a plant pot over it. I'm looking for a more permanent solution. Can composite decking be repaired?
Yes, so there's no problem in replacing the composite decking board, assuming you can get the same type. So as always with these jobs, if you do a bit of tiling in your house, you should always keep a few tiles, spare tiles in case of a breakage. And hope in the same way, if you put down composite decking, you should keep a few pieces of board in case something happens, in case something gets dropped on it, in case there is, something hot put down on top of it. Now, I would say if the plant pot looks right there, isn't that a perfect solution? But because depending how long the composite board is there, they do fade with time. So if you have a composite board that you have in the garage, or you go to the shop and you buy a fresh composite board, it could be a different shade than what's there now. So you've composite board down 2 years, it will have faded. You put on the new board, it still doesn't look the same. So give it a bit of thought. Maybe if you have a spare piece, go out to the garage. If not, go to your supplier and see, have they got a piece. It's not a big deal to replace it, but just how close to how it looks today is it.
All right, we'll take one more from Teresa, who also came up to us here in Stradbally and says, we have white PVC garden furniture that has been outside for several years and has gradually turned into grey PVC garden furniture. I've tried ordinary washing up liquid, elbow grease, elbow now exhausted. Chairs are still grey. What should I try next?
So they'd want to be good. White PVC tended in the past to be cheap and cheerful, but there was plenty of good, reclinable seats and so on. If they're good, if they're in good condition, if they're a good set, probably the best thing to use is something slightly abrasive. So there are PVC cream restorers, and you can also tell you what you try if you have it. If you have any ceramic hob cleaner, we mentioned, I think a couple of weeks ago, we mentioned a thing called Barkeeper's Friend cream. So slightly abrasive, and also has a really good cleaning aspect to it. Not so abrasive that it's going to leave scratch marks, but you're trying to remove the top, micron. So, I don't know how many microns are in a millimetre, but there's a lot. And you're trying to remove probably 10 microns. So you're trying to remove about, a tenth of a millimetre or 100th of a millimetre off the top surface of the PVC to reveal the original white that's below, but without. Now, you do one chair, and then you give it a rest. If you happen to know anybody who has a polisher for polishing their car, that would do a fantastic job on it very quickly. Otherwise, the hand will get tired, the elbow grease and the elbow will get tired. But if you did a chair, if you did half a chair today and the other half tomorrow, and then you'd get the whole lot done, and at least you'd have a perfect set at the end of it.
Brian, thanks for your time. We'll chat next Wednesday. News at 11 is next.